Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We are right around the correct time for when we were hoping to start, but I am just going to ask you all to be patient with us for one more minute while we get our screen going, and then we will get started. Just 1 minute.
Okay.
All right, everyone. Thanks for hanging with us while we kind of sorted out our stuff here. This is Laurel Birchfield. I'm with the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness, and I want to thank you all for joining us for our webinar today. We are joined by some excellent presenters who are all on mute at this moment, but as we get to their presentation, they'll be unmuting themselves and speaking with you. But I just wanted to thank everybody again and talk to you a little bit about how we're going to do this webinar today, and then introduce our facilitator so that we can get started. And I apologize, we have a little bit of background noise going on right now, but it will end shortly. So for those of you who have not been on a webinar before with us, we use GoToWebinar, and I just wanted to kind of walk through some housekeeping so you know how to use this. We do have a handout, which if you're looking at your task screen on your computer, it's towards the bottom of that little right-hand bar. And this handout is what we'll be presenting today. So if you open that up, you can download the presentation. We will be sending this out afterwards as well, so don't worry if you can't access it there, but we want to make sure you all have the ability to look at this PowerPoint. We'll also be recording today and sending that out for everyone. So if you hear something that you want to share with someone in your network, you'll be able to share the actual recording with them. And of course, you can contact any of us afterwards with follow-up questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. We will have a section at the end for Q&A, so we'll ask you to use the question box on your task screen to type in a question to us, and we'll do our best to answer those. Feel free to type it in at any time, though we will be waiting until the end of both presentations to be answering those questions. I think we're good, so we'll go ahead and move forward. And before I introduce our facilitator, we want to know a little bit about those of you who are on the call with us. So we have just a couple questions. And we'd like to know where everybody's calling in from today. We want to know where in Michigan, or if you're actually outside of Michigan, let us know as well. I know these categories are rather broad, so pick the one that makes the most sense for you. And we'll give you just another couple of seconds to let us know. All right, looks like we've got the majority of you who have responded. But if you haven't yet, take a second, let us know which part of Michigan or outside of Michigan that you're calling from. Okay. Looks like the majority of our folks are calling in from northern Michigan, including the UP, followed by, majority of folks are calling in from the eastern part of our state, followed by northern Michigan. We have a couple people who are calling in from outside of Michigan. So thank you for joining us. Glad to have you all here. One more quick question for you. We want to know what kind of work you do or how you're entering into this conversation. Let us know if you are working with a service provider or another form of nonprofit agency, if you're with a police department, if you're a community member or an advocate who just really feels that this is an important topic that you want to take up in your community, if you're an elected official, or that always popular other category, which kind of is a catch-all for everything else. And again, we're seeing quite a few responses, but I'm going to give you guys a couple more seconds to just let us know where you guys are kind of based in your community, what kind of work you're doing on this. All right, just a couple more seconds, and then I'll close the poll. All right, thanks for everyone for taking the time to answer. Let's see. Not a big surprise. Most of the folks calling in are with service providers or nonprofit agencies, and that's fantastic. That's who we were hoping to engage with on this conversation about decriminalizing homelessness. We do have a couple community members and advocates who want to learn more about this and become involved in their community. Welcome, we're glad to have you. And then about 28% of you are other. So thank you so much for taking the time to answer those questions with us. We're very excited to host this webinar and to have this conversation. And I hope that you guys are all excited to join us as well. I am now going to go ahead and turn it over to Gabby, who's going to help us facilitate today's webinar.
All right. Hello, folks. My name is Gabby Abelo. I've been the public policy intern for MICA. And basically, I'm here to give a little background on this webinar and why it's about starting the conversation. So this started as a research project into best practices for decriminalizing homelessness, specifically about crisis intervention teams. And at that point, I was looking into like larger cities out of the state, but eventually the research shifted to focusing on existing local community innovators because there was a realization that it would be good to ask the folks who are already doing the work, who could be much like the folks who have attended. And I'm sure you all want to hear that, so like get those experiences. And so then there was the realization of a lack of a one-size-fits-all policy. So basically, if you're talking to the folks who will be presenting, they showed many different methods, and it's basically meaning that like local communities all have their different experiences. So we want to like hear their insights as well as find ways to apply them ourselves in our communities. And really, the starting the conversation is what we would hope to be the first webinar in a series of others discussing decriminalization. So without further ado, we're going to have our first presenters, Captain Gillis and Mr. Ryan Hannon, who are going to present from Traverse City.
Okay, so this is Ryan Hannon. I'm the Street Outreach Coordinator for Goodwill Industries. We provide street outreach in our area, which is going out, looking for and engaging with people experiencing homelessness out on our streets with the main focus of trying to help people end their homelessness.
And this is Captain Keith Gillis with Traverse City Police Department, and I'm also the Homeless Liaison Officer. I'm in charge of our entire Road Patrol Division, who has the majority of the contact with the homeless in creating advocates for the homeless through our police department, through community policing.
And our Twitters are there, so follow along if you will. If you want to conversate on Twitter and tweet to us or tell us how terrible we're doing, feel free. Okay, next, Laurel. So, building partnership, when we were asked about doing this webinar, we were asked about tell us about how you built a partnership. So I went back and looked at some of my notes from years back, and it was about 2010 when I reached out to the police department about my concerns of some people's encampments experiencing homelessness were being confiscated and destroyed. And it turned out to be a combination of factors. It wasn't the police going along and just demolishing camps, but there was some of that. And we started to meet with Chief Warren, who was the chief at the time, and Captain Morgan, who was the, I guess, second in command, if you will. And we talked about homelessness, and we established a relationship where if they came along a camp or where there was a complaint in the community about a camp, that they would reach out to Street Outreach, and we would come down and work with the folks that we probably already knew, but if not, it was a great opportunity to engage with them, but also to, sometimes it was just abandoned camps. So if the city was going to clean up the camps, if it was abandoned, but if it was a live camp, it would give us the opportunity to interact with the client and be able to make sure they didn't get their things destroyed. After that, it came to my attention, there was the city parks department did a sweep and cleared a whole bunch of camps in a popular area where people camped in our city. And that was traumatic, and a lot of people lost a lot of things. But one of the things that happened was it kind of pushed a lot of people experiencing homelessness into our downtown area. So that sparked a meeting with the city because of all the issues they were now seeing in the downtown area, which was kind of the genesis of some really cool things in our community, including Community Outreach Court, which is runs a homeless outreach court model, and we're able to establish what they would call a wet house in our community, a place where people could live who were experiencing chronic homelessness and chronic alcohol use disorder. And during that time, we had some change in leadership in the police department, and Chief O'Brien came along and Captain Gillis, and for many years I wanted to establish a homeless liaison officer in our community, but it wasn't until Chief O'Brien and Captain Gillis, they took that initiative on their own, and they established Captain Gillis as our homeless liaison. So we're really grateful for that. I wanted to add here, if to build partnerships in your community. If you're a local law enforcement and your homeless system or your providers in your area have not reached out to you, that feel free, and I would encourage you to reach out to your providers in your community. Next slide, that leads to Captain Gillis talking about the motivation for the partnership.
So on the partner motivation, looking back at building partnerships, back when Chief Warren and Captain Morgan and Ryan got together and we were having all these camps being destroyed. At that time, Chief O'Brien was, I believe, a sergeant, and I was a patrol officer. And both of us as sergeants, we were looking for how are we going to use our resources to solve this problem, because it was something that was occurring on a regular basis. And by cleaning up the camps and taking care of, obviously you can see the pictures on the slideshow of all the trash and, just the collection of, homeless wandering through the downtown area. And, so it was a constant battle every single shift that we were working. Next slide, please. So on an average, the Traverse City Police Department would average 4 to 5 homeless deaths a year in the winter months alone. The police department would respond on any given day between 10 and 15 calls on homeless individuals in town. And, the thing about that is some days it would be the same individual. We would have an intoxicated homeless individual that would be walking down the street and fall over, and so passerbys would call, so we would respond. We'd go down there and trying to assist them. We'd get them up and we'd get them going, and they'd walk around the block and they'd fall over again. And so then somebody would call. So we would go and deal with that same individual sometimes 10, 15 times a day for one person. And so, there had to be something different. We had to come up with a solution to build these partnerships and motivation to bring down the resources that we were tying up to deal with just one individual. And so if you add 20, 30 people onto that list, then you could see how the call volume for just the police department and the fire department would go through the roof. So next slide. Next, there we go. So by cleaning up the camps, and while that did what Ryan is saying is push them from the camps to the downtown area. So we were getting concerns and calls from the downtown that we don't want them in front of our business, or we don't want them here, we don't want them there. And from our perspective, it got to be very frustrating, because where are they supposed to go? What are we supposed to do with them? And it got to the point where our officers, including myself as an officer, began to advocate for them. The businesses, we needed to get them involved as far as, what is the solution to this problem? Because we might push them out of, the farmer's market, and then they go down to Fifth Third Bank, or they go down under the bridge. People are complaining about them being under the bridge. So what is the solution? Next slide. So in the downtown area, we would have intoxicated individuals sleeping on the downtown benches. Citizens would avoid the downtown areas because of the homeless. Calls for service from businesses to move them along from their business. It was just a constant cycle over and over and over again in the downtown area. So what was the solution? Is this the police department's problem? Is this the fire department's problem? Is this North Flight, our EMS services problem? Whose problem is it? That's the big question. Next slide. I mean, you can see from this slide, this is downtown, right underneath a bridge and a major foot traffic area. City parks were getting overrun with trash, and homeless camps. They were, because they took all the camps out of the woods, so then they just started making camps under the bridges. And cleanup for this type of situation was a major event. As far as city resources, it drew a lot of the resources that couldn't be used in other areas. So next slide. So community policing is kind of a buzzword in law enforcement and in communities throughout the country. All the major cities, Chicago, New York, Detroit. Community policing has been around since the early 90s. Traverse City Police Department is a community police-based police department. Bringing everyone involved with the homeless community to the table has been a blessing for us. Ryan has been spearheading this for a long time, since I was a patrol officer. I've been with the department 20 years, and I can't even remember not knowing Ryan, I should say. There has to be a better way. There has to be a better solution for the police department and other agencies to deal with the homeless, and versus one agency trying to solve this problem, getting everybody on the same page, everybody working towards the same goal, is to end homelessness. Now, will we ever end it completely? No, probably not. But every step we take towards that direction is a positive for our police department. And by using community policing and bringing everybody to the table, I think we're so much further ahead the last couple of years than we were 5 years ago. Next page, next slide, please. Ryan?
So here we are. It's Captain Gillis and I sitting there. We're on a panel together in a community conversation put together by a church around homelessness. So we've gotten to the point where We work together. We're invited places together to talk about homelessness, and it's really powerful in the community. Another thing that's been a benefit here is right in the police policy, there's street outreach is mentioned in there when they're encountering individuals who are experiencing homelessness. Their policy is to make sure that street outreach is involved. There's a homeless liaison officer. Captain Gillis talked about community policing and relationship building. So the police, they know where the people experiencing homelessness are. They know them probably even better than the street outreach. So we're continuing to work together to build that relationship, the relationships with the community to include the homeless. So when you have the police chief or Captain Gillis talking in community settings, advocating for people experiencing homelessness, it's really powerful to help bring that thought of people that are homeless on our streets are actually part of our community, and then inviting the community to the table. A lot of times when we're hearing complaints from the community or people are hollering at city commission meetings, it's encouraging to see the police recognize that homelessness is a community issue. And then the police are enforcing the laws. They're not harassing the homeless. They're not also, when they get complaints of a kind of an unwanted homeless person here in my neighborhood, the police stick up for the people who are homeless and say, this person's not breaking any laws. There's nothing here for us to enforce. So they don't abuse their power, and that's really, really powerful. They're also have a presence in our winter night by night shelter. They come in periodically just to have coffee and work on that relationship and help to show that the police are working for them as well. There's also the police have been participating in awareness events we have. Each for the past 3 or 4 years, we have during Homeless Awareness Month, we have a walk for health and homelessness where it's put together by our local college, and I lead the way, and we have stations along the way, and one of the stations is the police department talking about all the people that have died that have experienced homelessness. Right by the river is the station. It's really powerful for the students in the community to hear from them. And also, the police sit on boards and activate in the community for affordable housing. They know the solution is housing, and they don't like to see, they witness the suffering that I witness of people experiencing homelessness all over town. So them as housing advocates is a wonderful thing. Next slide, please. So the partnerships are this is a list of partnerships with the police department and street outreach. So it's not just street outreach having partnerships with these areas. We have local drop-ins, the hospital, the mental health services, street outreach, the police, our Safe Harbor, our shelter, are all working together for the same common cause. Next slide, please. So what we're seeing is a better community, the decriminalization of homelessness. People aren't being locked up or prosecuted for issues directly related or caused by their homelessness. The lives of people experiencing homelessness are improved and help to promote engagement. It's not like we're having to deal with ping-ponging people experiencing homelessness all over town. That takes away time from the providers to be able to do their work and help people get housing, and then it helps the community to buy into the homelessness issue. Next slide, please. So what we're seeing, another outcome is positive relationships. This here is actual officers and actual people experiencing homelessness, not combative with each other, but in a supportive role. Next slide, please. So we operate on common values. We want to strengthen our community. We operate from a trauma-informed approach. It's as a street outreach worker, I've been doing this for 11 years, and to witness the interaction between the police and what people may say a problematic homeless person, it brings tears to my eyes because they do it they come from compassion, not of enforcement. That makes it easier for the police, and people experiencing homelessness can coexist in our community, realizing that housing really is the way. Next slide, please. What we've learned, I was very adamant about this, street outreach does not do police work. I've been asked by officers from other departments questions that is inappropriate for a person like me to answer. So it's really important that the police know that the street outreach, the helpers for homelessness, do not go out there and do the police work. However, police can do street outreach work. Police are talking to people about housing, talking to people about their health issues. And we found that people can and do trust the police. The stigma of the homeless not trusting the police is more of a myth than a factor. You know, there certainly is the rule of street thing that goes on out there, but we find more times than not that the people experiencing homelessness can trust the police department.
On that note, this is Captain Gillis again. On that note, one of the things that our department has kind of went through is a culture change in reference to the homeless, and you know, we're the biggest advocate for them because they're people too. And you know, police officers, 99% of the officers that get into law enforcement to help people. And who needs our help the most are the people that are experiencing homelessness. Our officers respond on a daily basis to calls involving the homeless versus looking at a way to make an arrest or take someone to jail. They're looking at ways that they could advocate for that individual on how they can actually help them. What does that person need? Sometimes they do need to go to jail, but 99% of the time they need to go to the hospital, or 99% of the time they need to go to some other outreach program that can help them make the next day better than the day they had today. So from the Traverse City Police Department, our chief is very proactive as far as community policing, as far as coming up with solutions on how we can help the homeless and improve the quality of life for everybody involved. And that includes the homeless because they are people too.
Next slide. So it's kind of like round pegs and square holes, right? But we're gonna save the questions till the end.
All right, thank you, Captain Gillis and Ryan. So before we transition to our next speakers, I just want to remind folks that as people are presenting, you can send in your questions and then we'll answer them at the end, but you can keep sending them in. So here next we have Dan Holloway and Elizabeth Kelly from Oakland County.
Yes, hello, it's Dan Holloway here. I'm the Jail Diversion Coordinator here at the Oakland Community Health Network.
And my name is, I'm sorry. My name is Elizabeth Kelly, and I'm the Executive Director at Hope.
And I thought I would start by just kind of walking through some of the early stages of our cross-systems collaboration with law enforcement here in Oakland County. It's going back, 20 years, I guess, and I think it all kind of got started with the when it was written into the Michigan Mental Health Code, encouraging all counties to try and figure out a way to decriminalize some police calls that were happening and allow maybe some new pathways to be developed, some new strategies to be developed, so that once an officer decided to decriminalize a call, that there was a place that they could be evaluated, and there was agencies willing to kind of meet with these folks to get to the root of the issue that led to the police contact. So we figured, because it was all, I guess, kind of a knowing that community policing has been around for a long time, kind of trying to establish some I guess the more formal pathways or some clearly defined pathways for officers to tap into, we figured the first place would be to just round up a group of stakeholders. So we did that, and we invited different folks, including from the criminal justice system, judicial system, of course, advocates, county commissioner, and we just started looking at, okay, what would this look like, and how receptive are law enforcement to this kind of, I guess, kind of a new ideology about how to handle these types of calls, and their willingness to, again, just do cross-systems collaboration, and kind of work out the details of where we could make the gears kind of line up a little bit better. So we, just continued to meet. Those meetings weren't always smooth. We started realizing that we basically, literally, kind of speak two different languages: the criminal justice system and the mental health and substance use systems. So we started just figuring out the different acronyms and kind of figuring out how to communicate more and talk about real practical solutions to these interactions. And then we really decided, well, okay, we know there's models out there, pre-booking jail diversion models. So we decided to look at those and analyze those and start using some of those types of strategies. We wanted to have police enable citizens to get help they needed without, formally entering the criminal justice system. So what we did, one of the things we did once we got, conversations rolling, and we were all kind of committed to that as a community, we, from the help of some training sergeants around the county, we started developing some training tools, some just basic training tools that I could take around to the police agencies, and we could just start introducing this concept, make sure they know what agencies are out there, what service providers can do. And so we developed a series of basic training materials, including a video that Elizabeth was really instrumental in, and my wife and two kids, actually, when they were small kids, played starring roles in this video. But it was, we knew we needed to have like this kind of mobilized training approach where I could take those materials out and just try to get in front of police agencies, in front of officers during their shift change. And so we kind of jumped off from there and just started going around and introducing the idea of decriminalizing these calls. And I think if we go to the next slide, we can see on the next slide that we're a fairly large county, of course, and I guess I was getting somewhat mixed results. Not to say I was being, outright turned away when I would approach a police agency and ask to come and talk about this with their command staff or their patrol officers, but they're just, other priorities. They have their own obligations, their own training requirements. And so it was kind of hit or miss, but we figured that that's kind of typical of different communities, is you need to get, we needed to establish some, faith in our system too. There was officers who were kind of frustrated with some of their interactions with their efforts to try and tap into our public mental health system and substance use systems. And again, it was just sort of these old frustrations that we needed to just discuss and kind of figure out again to help those gears line up a little bit better. But I did get a letter of endorsement that he had sent out for me to all the different police chiefs, and that started opening some more doors. And I get on the Police Chiefs Association's meeting on their agenda to get in front of any place I could, really, police conferences. And so we started realizing too, okay, we need to now start informing officers, like, these are your actual options. We're lucky we have a 24/7 psychiatric screening facility here in Oakland County. That's kind of a centrally located facility where officers, all first responders, can drop off individuals to get that evaluation done. So we certainly needed to make sure everybody knew, where common ground was and how that whole process, what to expect, how long that type of handoff is going to take. and those types of things. So that material we all sort of rolled into this basic kind of rudimentary training curriculum. And so I started going around, and again, knowing how busy police agencies are, how valuable their time is, it was getting, 15 to 20 minutes during their shift changes at all different hours of the day, of course. And just trying to figure out, okay, how can we really get, why is this a viable option, a good practical option for police, other than the kind of the obvious humanistic benefits of it. But we knew we needed to make it really simple and seamless and time effective. So less paperwork. We knew we needed to not bog them down with having them fill paperwork out. If they did go to our screening facility to drop somebody off, then it needed to be a real brief handoff. So now moving forward, we are lucky to have, that was happening for a long time. And then in those little 15-minute trainings kind of eventually led to me getting on like a 2-hour training block of a police agency. And so we really started improving that part of it, where we were more versatile, we had more information. I was learning more about what police officers wanted to know about, what we could improve on within our system. And we eventually did expand to a full CIT, which we're fortunate to have here in Oakland County, and that's been going on for over 2 years. And we also now currently have, and that's a 40-hour training. So that is kind of like the Cadillac of, trainings in terms of what we look to roll out here in Oakland County. Not every police agency can afford to send officers, every officer through, but we've got a lot of momentum going to where at least police agencies are sending a handful of their officers through our full CIT training. We also have mental health first aid that I'm a certified trainer in, and that's an 8-hour training that we offer to police agencies, and that's been going pretty well too here in Oakland County. And if we go to the next slide, please. Just a reiteration of how valuable the training time is. We have always seen a spike too in terms of, even when I would just go out and get, my 15 minutes or my 2 hours, we would see that agency, divert people more often. And then as, 6 months go by, we wouldn't see that they were making any more referrals. So again, I think it took us a while to get our local law enforcement agencies confident in us that we were going to follow through, and that anybody that they referred were at least going to be given some referral information. They were going to get an evaluation, that they weren't going to walk right back out, into the community, which was happening from time to time. So we needed to shore up what we were doing, making sure we were offering the whole menu and doing a full evaluation for people if officers were going to take the time to refer them to us. So what we then started doing, so we basically, it took me about a full year to get around to all the different police agencies, and that's kind of really been improving just immensely, especially over the last 5 to 7 years. It's kind of like now, I think, embedded in our communities here in Oakland County, where I remember there was a time where I felt like we were getting so much momentum and so many police chiefs that were getting on board with this concept of diverting folks, and that the police chiefs didn't want to be one of those that were left out and sort of stood out. And so now we've got a lot of momentum. I get a lot of calls on requests for trainings and requests for the mental health first aid and the CIT. So we're really, really excited about that. And we knew we wanted to go with that pre-booking model, because if they reach the district court level, that's kind of too far down the stream. And our efforts, I remember my first couple of years on the job, I would go to the district courts and I'd say, just, hand them back to us and let's get to the root of the issue. And we realized now we needed to stick to a true pre-booking model where there were no formal charges submitted in the first place. So we really focused our efforts on the different police agencies. And so on the next slide, it's basically now, like I said, it's kind of just widely understood and widely embraced by our local law enforcement agencies. Most of our 43 different police agencies have sent officers through that 40-hour CIT training for the mental health first aid. We're fortunate also to have one mental health court here in Oakland County. That's kind of an area that we're starting to focus more on, is embedding at least a liaison at the district court level to try and work with those folks who are engaged in the judicial system. And we recently brought somebody in to work with county probation officers, just again to address that middle ground there. If they get past the police, because some of these calls, are appropriate to get involved with the courts. The true pre-booking model is for those cases where there's, low level providers. And so with that, I think I will turn it over to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. Okay, so our organization, we run the largest emergency shelter in Oakland County, and we were founded in 1998 as a seasonal warming center, which was a response to a person who froze to death in Pontiac. And the task force consisted of mental health providers, faith groups, and the Pontiac Police Department. They were very, very invested from the beginning because Pontiac was a small city, but they noticed that there were a lot of individuals experiencing homelessness that were either camped out in some of the parks or just kind of walking around the downtown area. So as a warming center, we operated about 3.5 months during the winter at that time. Now we're actually a full year-round shelter, but at that time, that was how we got started. And we were an overnight warming center because the Pontiac police were the ones that indicated that there was this need, that they needed a place that would accept individuals who had been drinking or high, or and also a place where the intake could be a little bit flexible in the evening time. There was another shelter in Pontiac, but they required sobriety in order to enter, and they had a very strict 5 p.m. curfew, which proved to be a barrier to having folks that were in the area going into the shelter. The Pontiac police also indicated that they were concerned that the only option open to them when they encountered an individual whose behavior reflected mental illness or was just somebody who was cold and looking for a way to get out of the cold. They had situations where people would heave a brick through a window of a business just to get the 3 hots and a cots at the Oakland County Jail. And so they were trying to see from their perspective how they could partner to be able to have a better option than just simply arresting individuals. And so because of this close relationship, once Hope launched as a warming center, we allowed the police to drop off individuals throughout the night whenever they encountered somebody. So often they were saying they were doing some sort of low-level jail diversion by encountering individuals and saying, you have a choice, Oakland County Jail, or we can take you over to the warming center. Then in 2012, Pontiac actually was in bankruptcy, and so the police department ended up being folded, and the Oakland County Sheriff's Department took over. Now, the great thing about us having Oakland County Sheriff's Department as our policing agency was that Dan had already done the heavy lifting in convincing them that jail diversion was something that they needed to embrace, and they also had a lot of practice in doing that. So they had practiced jail diversion, and they also had most of their officers, their deputies, were trained in how to interact with individuals with disabilities as well. So in order to alleviate the stress of the individuals experiencing homelessness, and also to alleviate the stress on the city, Hope was able to secure land donation, and this was as the time wore on, and we created a backyard with large picnic shelters, access to bathrooms and things like this, so that we were going to be able to do our part in helping individuals move forward. Next slide, please. So this is the help card. Our continuum of care created a business card sized card, and one side on the left, those are all the numbers and agencies that are open 24/7. And then on the right is the back side of the card, and that has more agencies there. We, on purpose, went and made this particular card, this resource card, business card sized, because it can be used by law enforcement. It's easily kept in a pocket or in a little spot on the hat that the officers have, but it also can be used in emergency rooms and things like this. And so this card can actually be given to individuals, or it can be used by the person who's interacting with the individual who's homeless, and make sure that they have the information that they need. We also noticed that these cards are usually taped to the dashboard in the police cruisers too. So it's just kind of a quick way for police officers to be able to know where to take individuals. And the Oakland County Sheriff's Division, even though they're the policing agency for Pontiac, we actually receive people from all over the county. And a lot of the adjacent cities like Auburn Hills and Waterford often bring individuals experiencing homelessness to the shelter too, as part of the diversion. Next slide, please. Next slide. I think we're stuck. I'll just continue on. I guess it'll eventually get to the next slide.
Sorry, so, Elizabeth, I've got you on the slide with law enforcement, hope in law enforcement. Is that the slide you want to be on?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. Hopefully it'll show up.
No, that's okay. I was actually having some screen issues here too. So, we produce an ID card from the Homeless Management Information System that we use as our database for our guests. And we've been doing this for the past 6 or 7 years. Anecdotally, we noticed that individuals that were out and about in the community seemed to get picked up more often and maybe taken a more legal route when they didn't have any ID on them at all. And as a part of trying to help people get ID, we were providing the HMIS ID card. It's something that can be printed off using that database. And we found that when they had this ID, often the police just brought them to the shelter. Even if they were no longer shelter guests, they sort of identified them as somebody who might be needing our services. There is a stigma attached to homelessness, and a lot of times individuals are nervous and they won't offer up that they are homeless. So that's something that was really helpful to start that conversation. Hope also has a close partnership with law enforcement, because we also get a quick response to the shelter when we have a 911 call. And the officers that respond are typically the same ones, officers that are assigned to our particular area. They're trained to work with special populations. We find they have an abundance of patients, and we've gotten to know each other, and so we do work well together. Similarly to what Ryan and Captain Gillis indicated, it's that building that relationship that really makes all the difference. And our neighborhood also has a community policing deputy who also will come in and have coffee at dinner, or come when people are lining up to come into the shelter in the evening. Sometimes they come into the parking lot, get out and shake hands, but do a lot of things to be able to help reduce that fear. We had a situation a couple of years ago where there was some increase in gang activity that was directed at individuals experiencing homelessness. And the sheriff's department found out, and they deployed the man who was the head of the gang task force to come and talk with us, who provided some training for individuals, actually talked with people who had been assaulted, and they began to also do some policing to see if they could find the source of the gangs, and we're actually quite successful in doing that. So also, Hope is also a resource. So a couple of years ago, we were getting angry calls from the Pontiac Downtown Development Authority, and they were calling up and saying, well, your people are loitering and driving traffic away from our downtown area. And they were trying to relaunch businesses because Pontiac, after being in bankruptcy, really was starting over from ground zero. So I went to a meeting, and the captain of the Pontiac substation was attending along with the business owners. So we talked about things like how to resolve issues such as loitering, public urination, and panhandling and things like that. And so that was when I had mentioned previously that we had installed pavilions and sort of created a backyard area. And we realized that that was important to give people a destination, a place where they could safely be, where they could use bathroom facilities. And just something as simple as that really helped alleviate a lot of the issues in the downtown area. In fact, at a State of the County address a couple of years ago, the Sheriff's Department had cited that Hope's partnership with this had really dramatically reduced a lot of that impact, that negative impact on the city. And then we also work with the Oakland County Sheriff's Division in particular, because Pontiac has some of these sort of shaky places that they call room and boards, and most of them are not in great shape, and they have absentee landlords, charge a lot of money, etc. So the police are committed to going in and shutting some of those down. So these folks aren't typically homeless at that time, but they do become homeless because when the room and board is shut down because of all sorts of violations, the Sheriff's Department knows that they can quickly relocate individuals to our shelter. And the same thing with individuals who may have fires in their apartment or the building that they're living in. We've had 2 major apartment fires in the last year, and they were able to be relocated. Anybody who didn't have someone else to go stay with could relocate to our shelter, and we would help them resolve their homelessness. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite things to do because often the police are called out for all sorts of negative actions, and I think that they get a bad rap. That they're not, they're not seen as being a help to the community. But it's our policy, especially when we see one of the responding deputies or officers who are going above and beyond, we send to either the substation captain or the chief of police of their law enforcement agency an email that tells why we feel they did an extraordinary job. The folks that we work with are often difficult and complex, and the officers that and the deputies that respond do respond with a trauma-informed approach that is really important. I have one illustration also about how the deputies not only appreciate when we send that email to their commander, but also protect us and respond when there's negativity in the neighborhood. So we had this neighbor who was concerned because his children were playing ball in the street, and the ball bounced into our yard, and one of our guests went and threw the ball back and said something innocuous like, "Boy, that looks like fun." And he came around and was screaming and yelling about all the pedophiles that we had on our property. And we have nothing but degenerates here. And he was calling 911 as this happened. And so I came out of the building as the deputy pulled up, and this man started screaming at the deputy that he needed to do a background check on everyone who was at Hope. But before I could respond, the deputy, he held up his hand to me and he said, so you think I should do a background check on everyone in the neighborhood before they can move here? And I could just start with you. And the guy stopped and he was, oh, whoa, no, 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 that's not what I want. And the deputy said, well, everyone here has the same rights that you do. And just saying that and making that man listen to a different perspective was really just such a great thing. And the man calmed down and had a good conversation. Shining a light on something from a different perspective that was really, really important. And then next slide, please. Okay, so there are a couple Oakland County initiatives where agencies are working with law enforcement. The first one is Common Ground, which is our access point for crisis intervention in mental health and substance use in particular. They recently opened a safe sober unit, which is a place if law enforcement encounters an individual who is maybe inebriated and they're indicating that maybe they might want to do something about it. That's a place where law enforcement can take these individuals for an evaluation and for them to continue that outreach to try to help them get into a detox. We have a program called STAR. I don't know what the acronym stands for, but Oakland County Health Network, Community Housing Network, and HOPE. It's a joint project that we do to reduce jail recidivism. So Oakland County Jail identifies individuals that are in jail currently who may be discharged to homelessness and then lets us know. We fast track them to HOPE and housing through Community Housing Network, and Oakland Community Health Network provides that mental health support. And then this last one is a brand new project. It's something that we're just in the process of launching, but we're really excited about it. Dan had mentioned that the district courts are not highly motivated to participate in some of these programs because they are funded through fines that they collect. And so this project is called Functional Sentencing. And what it is that the Alliance for Housing, HOPE, Community Housing Network, and Street Democracy, which are attorneys who worked with underserved populations, they are working to create as part of a diversion from jail, to create a non-monetary sanction that includes treatment for those who come to court for misdemeanor offenses. So often that becomes an impediment to us to get people housed because they have an outstanding warrant. So what we're doing is trying to help every court think like those special treatment courts that Dan had mentioned. And so the individuals, when they come to court, are represented by a street democracy attorney who negotiates the sentence and also helps the client understand that failure to comply with that sentence, like maybe it's going for mental health treatment or doing community service, failure to comply could result in a default sentence such as fines, jail time, etc. So we're very excited about this, and this pilot is something that we're doing that's been funded through the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan. So Laura, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dan, Elizabeth. That was a lot of great information. Like to see the process and just how this really got started. Now we're a little over time, so we're going to really turn it to the questions that people have asked. We've got a few here. You guys can keep on sending in your questions as you see fit.
Yeah, and as a reminder, we did schedule this till 1 o'clock, but we'll stick around for a couple more minutes. We did start a little late, so feel free to stick around with us. Or if you have to go, we will be sending out the recording, so you can go ahead and leave, and we'll send out the recording with these questions being answered. So we have received a couple questions. The first one is for anybody to answer. Do any of these service providers and law enforcement personnel utilize Michigan 211 and or My Bridges to locate resources for homeless individuals?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Anyone else? All right. Do you have anything else to say? Do you have anything else to say about that process other than just the acknowledgement that you use them?
Well, we have a 211 is actually on our card, on our help card, as something to remind law enforcement that that's another option. But we also have a navigator internally in our shelter that is sort of like a case manager, and the function of the navigator is to help people connect with resources. And so occasionally we're presented with somebody who maybe doesn't fit into some of the usual resources that are resource partners, and so we use those kinds of assistance. There's also we can do this in Oakland County through ECHO, which is a health department sort of version of 211 that provides information about resources within the county too.
Thank you. This question, I believe, is more for Ryan. There's two people who would like to know a little bit more about the Community Outreach Court. Can you share some more information with us?
Sure. It was an initiative. It's now, I think it's approaching its third year. It really was a champion. We had a community champion who was a lawyer who wrote a grant. She originally wanted a homeless court. That grant wasn't funded, but she was able to get a grant for community outreach court and was able to model it like a homeless court style. So we have, I believe it's 9 community providers, including the police department, that can refer people in. They come up with a plan with their worker, which oftentimes reflects the plan that the worker's already working with the person on. And when they meet those goals, the court will graduate them, and what they do is it'll waive fines that have piled up over the years. There's certain criteria. There's some public safety crimes that are not, or charges that are not considered for the court. But it's basically to help people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness to get some fines waived, maybe help get an ID, or even sometimes waive jail fees. A lot of times the situations were because of they were homeless or was perpetuated by homelessness. So it helps to hopefully reduce the cycle of homelessness.
Thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and speak out of turn a little bit here and say that if anybody wants to know more, I'm sure they can contact Ryan for a deeper conversation. Is that fair to say, Ryan?
Certainly.
We have someone who just wanted to let us know that there is a trial court funding commission form to look at the conflict in courts between needing to collect fines to operate and waiving fines for those with an inability to pay. Hopefully this will get fixed soon. Thank you for letting us know about that. That definitely came up in Dan and Elizabeth's conversation, so it's good to know that that effort is being made, and hopefully we can follow that and find out what happens. And then one last question, and we'll go ahead and let everybody go. How can we engage our police departments to participate in training? Jackson County deeply struggles with the criminalization of homelessness.
Well, this is Captain Gillis, and I can answer that question. Our entire department has been sent to the Community Mental Health First Aid Program. Our officers have the access of an iPad to have instant access to community mental health while they're at the scene to save time. I mean, time is money, and the more resources we use to deal with a particular call, then we're tied up with that. So getting a police department to be proactive as far as the training, it saves time in the long run because you're not wasting those resources, to help solve a problem. When they have the proper training, they can address that problem a lot quicker, and they're available to handle different calls. So it's been a bonus for us to be involved with community mental health. And we also have an officer that assists with the community outreach court. Having all these resources and tools are what's going to solve, or put an end to this issue eventually if we keep working at it with all these other partnerships.
Thank you. And I do see that we're quite a bit late, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here and just Again, thank everybody. Thank Gabby, our wonderful intern, for coordinating this webinar. Thank our presenters. This is fantastic information for our communities as we start thinking about how we can either start these relationships or advance them, and what kind of programs are available out there. So this webinar is going to be sent out to everybody. Please feel free to share it within your networks. I will send it from my email address. If anyone has additional questions or concerns or would like to be connected with any of our presenters, let me know. Just respond to that email and we'll do everything we can to answer your questions and connect you. Thanks to everyone who stuck around. Thanks for our presenters, and I hope you all have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.